Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's PMI Friday webinar, Black Belt Tools with a Kick with Dennis Crommentuijn-Marsh. My name's Rich Seddon, and I'll be facilitating the session today, which includes running the Q&A desk, which we'll be using throughout the presentation. The Q&A and chat buttons can be found in your Zoom control panel, so please do keep your questions, comments, observations coming, and I'll put them to Dennis. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we'll send you a link via email early next week to the full recording of both the audio and the presentation. As usual, we're also broadcasting live on Facebook and LinkedIn. So to those joining us on the live streams, you are very welcome. To be able to participate in the polls, receive recordings via email, make suggestions for future topics, why not register at pmi.co.uk/webinars. We'll send, as usual, all registered participants a short voice of the customer survey at the end of the session. We'd be really grateful for your feedback and suggestions for future topics that you'd like us to cover. Also really like to draw your attention as well that May's schedule has been published this week and is now available to book. A fantastic looking schedule on there, including some simply excellent ones that I'm presenting myself, of course. We've shifted the focus away from the topics for this month. April's been all about topics. Next month is very different. Lots of focus around data, insights, and things like that. So do take a look at that. We're really excited to keep bringing these to you. Before we go further as well, I would also like to point out that today is a very special occasion. It is the 50th PMI Friday webinar. Where have those 50 weeks gone? Well,
Yay.
COVID for one. So on that note, I would like to say two thank yous. One to you, all of the participants that join us, and the thousands of you that have registered this week and joined in these webinars. Thank you for your comments, your contributions, and all your suggestions for those future topics. It's really kept us on our toes, and we've loved doing it. It's truly our privilege to be able to deliver these things. And the second is a thank you to my colleagues, my team at PMI. It's no mean feat to pump one of these out week after week. The thought and the energy that goes into it is quite remarkable. These guys have risen to the challenge wonderfully, and I couldn't be more proud of the setup that they've managed to do and the content they deliver week in, week out. And long may it continue, folks. No pressure. So thank you again for your continued support. And now I'd like to hand over to Dennis.
So thank you very much, Rich. Good afternoon, everybody. So thank you for those kind words. And it's lovely to see so many of you again this week on this webinar. So I hope you're going to enjoy what I'm going to deliver to you today.
And a fascinating, different audience, Dennis. Today, I've been looking through the list of names as well. So welcome to all the consultants that have joined us as well. We're very flattered to have you with us. We do hope you find this both educational and accurate. No pressure, Dennis.
And of course, if you spot anything, do get in touch afterwards. Happy to talk and learn from you about how you use these tools. So when this webinar got put together, the title, I mean, last week, a few weeks ago, was one about green belts that pack a punch, and this one was black belt tools with a kick. And I used to do martial arts, and I thought martial arts, a bit boring, but I do like cooking as well, and I like spicy food. So black belt tools with a kick. We're going to talk today about spices, in particular about chilies. So what we're going to cover today, therefore, is number one, we're going to understand the landscape within which you operate. Number two, which chili is spicier, the red one or the green one? I like it hot, the meaning of words. Number four, how do you optimize the outcome of your improvement project? So in this case, the growth strategy, of course, for chilies. Number five, that always that question when you go through any change. Will people like it, what I've done? In this case, of course, the chili recipes. And then number six, a creative thinking technique that saves me every single time. If you know, it's Tris rule, and if you know which Tris rule it is, the one that says just turn around or reverse, do stick it in the chat window if you know which Tris rule I'm going to talk about. So those are six elements within this. Now, of course, all of you, I hope and I assume, have gone through a kind of improvement training. You've gone through your green belt. And in the green belt, there are loads of useful tools and methods. And we should not ignore any of these. And my lovely colleague Sean a few weeks ago did a nice webinar on this called Greenbelt Tools that Pack a Punch. So I highly recommend to you have a listen to him and his insights into the Greenbelt level tools. Of course, today we're going to go beyond that, and here are just a few of the tools that we teach people at Black Belt. But I do want to come back to this key point here, guys. Don't go here until you've used the Greenbelt tools very, very well. I mean, one of my lovely colleagues I worked with in a client, she called it the Toyota Kata. Huh? Do the basics, do them well, and do them continuously. But before I share you some of my favorite tools, the key challenge that I see very often is the same tool gets used over and over again. And I always want to say abused over and over again. So in this case, always start with a question. I've just reviewed a Black Belt project this morning and certified this gentleman, which was an amazing project, amazing story. And one of the learnings that he took away from this Black Belt journey was that sometimes he got stuck with the tools. And the key lesson for him was if I just define the question first, define the question first, then I can decide which tool is going to help me to give me the best answer to that question I've got. And spend the time, therefore, on getting the question. So I would like to, first of all, get your feedback. I want to get some insights for you. Now, if you've worked on a Black Belt level project, or even if you haven't worked on a Black Belt level improvement project, but just any improvement project, and you got stuck and didn't know what to do next. So I've got two questions here, and please add them into the chat window, your answers. Number one, what helped you to get back on track? And number two, another question, do you have any favorite Black Belt level tool?
So that's one for the chat window. We usually use polls, but we thought we'd mix it up a little bit to make sure you're all awake and paying attention this sunny Friday afternoon. So do pop it in the chat, and also don't let us sit hanging. Keep things coming. At least with a poll, we know we guaranteed some results. Phew, I can see some coming in. We're okay. We're okay. Good news, Dennis. People are listening.
Oh, hi, okay. Christian, and hello, Martin, by the way.
Dennis, let me just help me understand by kind of asking this. What are you trying to get a feel of?
So it's really, I mean, it's quite natural to get stuck in any project at some point on that journey. Mm-hmm. And when I get stuck, it always has to come back to the basics. And I realize when I reflect on what didn't go well, it's the basics that often go wrong. So it's just interesting to see how, if other people recognize this and what they do then to get back on track. Of course, also, do they have a favorite tool as well? Because I'm always keen to learn from other people's favorite tools. Huh?
Well, yes, quite. Cool. So we've got a mix of responses coming in. Favorite tools, we've got ANOVA coming in. We've got, in terms of getting back on track, reverting back to the charter as a fundamental starting point, revalidating the question being asked, a sanity check, reviewing my SciPoc. Oh, and look at this one, Kirsty, the Process Manager Handbook. Thank you, Kirsty. Great to hear it's useful. And affinity diagrams. So we've got a few others coming in here, still not back on track, exclamation mark, interrelationship diagram, control charts, cause and effect, knowing what the end point is, no favorite tools in the toolbox, that's the what's the problem, getting back on track, talking through the problem with others, revisiting the topic, revisiting program notes. So what do you make of that lot?
Fantastic. Wow. So thank you for all of those. So I think I can spot a few themes. One of the key themes I'm actually hearing is it's back to the basics. Back to the basics, actually, in any green belt project. And when you talk about a black belt project, it's not the exciting stuff and the black belt level tools where things go wrong. It's back to those basics, asking those simple questions. And I must say, I love the ones, like the one from Martin that says, go back to the charter, go back to those basics. And just check your understanding with the stakeholder. What is it that they truly wanted to accomplish? So it's lovely to see those coming through here.
Well, it's a particularly interesting one, that on the charter and the one around the SciPoc as well, because sometimes they can feel like a bit of a drag, can't they? And it can
Oh, yes.
sometimes feel like you're having to go through a checkbox exercise to make sure these things are in place.
Yeah.
But having faith in the methodology that it's there for a reason,
Yeah.
you may not always need it, is absolutely the case. But really interesting to see those two pop up particularly
Yeah.
so quickly.
But yeah, but ANOVA can be absolutely joyful. I believe was one of the responses. It's a nice black belt level tool. So thank you, people, for those.
Yeah,
I'm not
thanks,
going
everyone.
to burst out in song here, but I will share with you a few of my favorite tools. Sorry, did it there?
You did promise no song, Dennis.
Ah, blast.
Where's the wimple?
So on that note, moving on quickly. Dream black belt tools with a kick. It reminds me of a few quotes. So Peter Drucker had a quote in this area. Deming had a quote in this area. And it was all about you can improve what you can measure. You can measure what you can define, and you can define what you can understand. And that last one, that understanding, and that especially the common understanding between you and your stakeholders, between you and your project team, between you and your process operators, that is for me the most fundamental element. So when I go through all the tools next, keep in the back of your mind, do you understand what the tool is trying to accomplish? And do you understand what the answer is trying to tell you? So keep it in the back of your mind. And if you're not sure, do reach out. So number one, understanding your landscape. I'm going to share two of my favorite tools here, the system map and the interrelationship diagraph, which I believe one of the other attendees on this webinar as well said.
Hannah mentioned that in her list.
Oh, fantastic. So first of all, the system map. So the system map, understanding that total landscape. And for me, it sometimes feels again mechanistic. What Rich says, you go through these tools, you think, why am I doing this? Why am I making my leadership team suffer? Huh? But when you come back to the questions, that doesn't only say, what does my system look like? But then you can use it as a diagnosis tool. Where are my hotspots? Do I have a united view within the leadership team, what the organization should look like? Is this the current state or the future state? How do we redesign it? Where do we need to redesign? How mature are we and how aligned are we? And I always have a couple of questions then. Once we've defined this whole system, which can be a half a day or with one organization, we've been evolving it now for more than 2 years. And it's just because we keep thinking and reflecting and adjusting the way the system is operating. But the question that keeps being a frustrating question is, what is the single verb and noun for which I want my organization to be known by? Or verb, adjective, and noun. Because if it's grow chilies, of course, we become a grower. Selling chilies, we may just become a sales distribution organization. Or designing chilies, I want to go into R&D. So just those two words can have a fundamental impact how you view the organization, therefore how you sell it to your customers and to the employees who you work with. So lots of questions there. I mean, I'm sure you've read now a number of them, but always come back to this. What is our shared view of that landscape? And that leads me down to number two. Once you've agreed on that, of course, you want to figure out where to start with your black belt project or with any project. And I had recently a project where they said, we don't need to define the problem. Here are the solutions, here are the deliverables, go for it. And it took us a few months to actually say, this is the wrong way around. Back to the basics, back to have the confidence and the trust. And therefore, after a few months, we went back to this tool, affinity diagram, interrelationship diagram, and then a sequence diagram, of course, part of the 7 management planning tools. But this tool, when I start doing this with a new group, with a new leadership team, with a new project, people are always confused. Why are we doing this? Why do we spend the effort? And I vividly remember one project, and it was a hot day. The sun was streaming through the windows. It was warm in the office we were in. And we did this interrelationship diagram. And by the end of it, they all sat back in silence and they stared at it. And they finally saw that all this discussion arguments they had for a long time, within an afternoon, we resolved it. We resolved the confusion and unclarity. So for me, this is one of these fantastic transformative tools around, in this case, what should I grow? And where should I start with growing my chilies? And the funny thing is that when you go to the bottom of those bullet points there, of course, should I ask my family and friends first how spicy they like their food? Because perhaps they don't like chilies at all. And perhaps I should be growing something else. So next then, the next set of favorite tools is about which chili is spicier. And I'm going to share with you the hypothesis testing, X-bar and R chart, and attributes agreement study. Testing. Now, in the left top corner is something that I am particularly proud of. It was designed over a number of years, and it's now well into its third decade of maturity and understanding. It was started by one of my lovely predecessors, and I inherited it, and we've kept evolving it. And together with one of my other colleagues, we keep refining, we keep researching hypothesis tests, and we keep figuring out, is this the most useful way to answer the question? Of course, hypothesis testing is all about asking that question, is there a difference? Now, point number one, back to basics. If there's a massive difference between two sets of data, you do not need a hypothesis test to prove it. That there's a difference. Yeah, it's quite obvious. But when you have small differences and you still want to determine if there's a difference, that's when you need to go to the hypothesis test. So it can give you that clarity and take away confusion. So it can go through all this mist and noise to still get something useful out of your data set. And that's why I love hypothesis tests, whether parametric, non-parametric, or even working with ordinal or attributes data. The key question though, whatever you do with hypothesis testing, is my sample representative for my population? And like the one I had this morning, a very limited data set, because what was being used was the month-end reported data, not actually the raw data from which the month-end report was created. So have that confidence as a black belt to go back into your system, digital, analog, or otherwise, and go and collect that very frequent data, not just a month-end report. And if you are ever in doubt, go down to power and sample size, of course, to check what your power is on this. X-bar and R chart. Now, I could have chosen the IMR chart, but actually black belt level tool, X-bar and R chart. And I would just want to go back. So this year, 16th of May, I'm going to hereby officially announce Shelby Schuhart Day. Yeah, it was the first memo sent from Schuhart to a colleague within Western Electric on the 16th of May, 1924, about, hey, perhaps this tool here, this method might be useful to you. And there's the original memorandum there on the left-hand side. So, of course, back to the chilies. Is there a difference between my crop? As in, within my crop, could be length, the color, the spiciness, or are there differences between different crops I grow perhaps in different greenhouses or in different types of soil or hydroponically? Yeah? But of course, whenever you do a control chart, and doesn't matter which one, and I think so far I've probably used about 20 different types of control charts. Yeah. But this, of course, the one which is really useful for the within and between variation. So apply the learning phase, apply the operating phase, and apply the recalculation rules. Very often black belts, I still see them going wrong there. So do know how to do those elements. One more point on that. The X-bar and R chart has an additional benefit, of course, when you have subtle changes and you still want to see it in your data. The X-bar and R, of course, by using S divided by the square root of N, therefore decreases the limits, therefore a signal becomes visible much quicker. So again, if you want to see rapidly small changes, the X-bar and R chart can be useful as well. The third one in this section here is the attributes agreement study, and often it gets overlooked. Because again, it's about subjective data. It's about opinions. Now, I don't know what it's like in your organization, or if you ever use Facebook or Twitface. I think lots of people have opinions. And then, of course, you say, that's wrong, that's right. So how do you make that judgment when something is right or wrong? Warmer, colder, spicier, or milder? So the attributes agreement study is a wonderful way. And what it does, it helps you to harmonize the way that people inside your organization do subjective assessments of a feature or characteristic. In this case, of course, how spicy is a dish? And like I said, most people will determine quite easily the difference between a very spicy dish and a very mild dish. So you don't need to have this attributes agreement study. Where it really comes to the fore is when you have those boundaries. When does mild become medium? When does medium become hot? And by testing out those boundaries, that's where you get clarity in how your appraisers are going to work with you. So the ingredients you need, of course, are different dishes. One judge who will act as the expert. Typically, I would say 3 or more appraisers, and then, of course, test, retest, which means, of course, a lot of food, which I'm quite happy with. And then what's the highlight for me about an attributes agreement study? It's the fact it can then give you statistical information around the difference in terms of agreement, disagreement between the judge and the appraisers, between the appraisers, and then within the appraiser, of course, between test and retest. So it's all about consistency. And the absolute highlight for me is when one of your people on purpose selects the incorrect answer, the kappa statistic in this case will tell you, hey, it looks like they chose on purpose. I find it just a magical part of attributes agreement study. Richard.
Yes, hi Dennis. Just a request, really, to the audience to take advantage of Dennis's capabilities here. We've deliberately not put any polls in today, and I should have mentioned this earlier on, with the view that this particular webinar topic would gain more insight if we turn it into chat. So please do keep your questions coming. If you do have an observation on any of these tools as Dennis is talking, throw them in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll put them to him so we can have a discussion, particularly responding to any particular problems you've got, questions you've got, queries you've got. The harder the better, frankly. The man's on form, so let's keep him going.
Thank you very much, Rich. So yes, do give me your questions or challenges. One highlight I had with this particular method was working with guide dogs for the blind. And we had to assess how to judge a little puppy, very cute, to be ready to become actually a full-grown guide dog. There were 12 characteristics, and we realized there was a whole issue there with the way people were judging these cute, fluffy little things. So again, the attributes agreement study came to the rescue, and we had a test, a retest, we had improvements, we came back 3 months later, and we proved the way in which they were doing the judging, and therefore, of course, improving the speed by which the guide dog could go to its final destination, of course, the person that needed one, with a far lower degree of what they call the failed dogs that then end up in my house because they make beautiful, beautiful pups, beautiful animals for other purposes.
A horrible feeling you were going to say rugs there, Dennis.
No comment.
Let's not go there.
So I like it hot. Now I like it hot. I'll give a bit more clarity what I mean by like it hot in a minute, but of course, operational definitions, back to that understanding that I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, and then your communication strategy. So I like it hot. Tonight we're going to have a curry. It's Friday night. It's tradition, and either I like it spicy, or I like it warm. And of course, with I like it warm, as a black belt, back to that on target with minimum variation. That's the quest. That's the challenge you want to find yourself in. So you want to figure out, is it too hot? Is it too cold, or just right? I like Goldilocks approach. That's what we want to aim for. We want to get it just right, on target, minimum variation, which of course then leads to the C word, consistency. Whatever restaurant you go to, you want it to be consistent. But every single time, you want to make sure it's right. You don't want the standard to drop. Of course, you may wish the standard to improve, but that means you may have to change your restaurant. But you want to be consistent, so you know the moment you order something, you know what you're going to get. And that leads me to this quote by Deming. You may have recognized it from some of our other materials, But when I re-looked at it, I found a very subtle difference in this quote here, and it was in the first part of the sentence. An operational definition is one that people can do business with. And I thought, that's lovely. Huh? Deming was not a theorist. It was all about pragmatism. It was all about how do you apply this stuff in business. So whatever words you're going to use, make sure the people in your organization can do business with them. And therefore must be communicable with the same meaning to your vendor, the supply chain, to the purchaser, and to, of course, your customer in this case. The same meaning yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And I just love that. We all understand what the words mean. So, of course, a top tip here from a black belt, and I've fallen in this trap as well. That's why I can talk about it so much, so much expertise, I guess. I've fallen foul of this. And well, I remember one story here, a lovely project where I had to design a helicopter, conceptual helicopter. Came up with 6 designs, and after 6 months of graft, presented the 6th helicopter to the customer, and the customer, very polite, very nice, and said, "Terribly sorry, that is not what I asked for." And I thought, blast, what did I miss? And I realized I had gone head first into solution mode without understanding truly what the customer wanted. Data can have the same challenge in your organization. You may just have data lying around, and just because you have it lying around, that's what you go for. But just step back from it and say, is this data helping me to answer the question? Answer what the customer actually wants. And that leads me to effective communication. Now, if you have teenagers, you may recognize this conversation. What do you want to eat? I don't know. How about a pizza? Well, yeah, like whatever. What's on their little box? Do you like vegetarian? Well, yeah. Great, I'll order one of those. Okay. Here it is, enjoy. Don't like it, too spicy. Yeah, you may recognize a conversation like that in your household or with family and friends. So effective communication is always key. And of course, one of the key challenges as a black belt is to understand the other person you are communicating with. Where are they? Are they actually ready to hear what you've got to say? Do they understand what you have to say? And it comes back to my biggest mantra when it comes to stakeholder engagement: no surprises. Whomever you talk to, and I'm sure you've had situations where you say, I wish I'd said something different, or I don't think they understood me, or I think what I said to them was a surprise. Did I say it too late? So, of course, some of the key tools to go for here is Johari, understand their blind spot, and the OK Corral from TA. I'm okay and you're okay. Transactional analysis, remain in adult mode where possible. Clearly choose your transactional state, but stay in that neutral mode as much as possible. Understand the MBTI process profile. How would they like to receive the information? I have one person. Do you want food? Yeah. Give him anything. What time? Oh, I don't care. Food, and just give to me whenever you're ready. Somebody else I know? No, I want this. It has to be like that on the plate, and it only must have these ingredients. And by the way, can I have it at this particular time, please? So again, if you know how they operate in terms of the MBTI profile, you can then, of course, accommodate that in the way you communicate, and therefore no surprises when you then deliver that food to them. Keep the language as simple as possible. Now, for those who don't know me that well, I am not English, and you may spot a little accent subtly. So English as a first language. So I've got English as a second language. And it always is an interesting challenge when you work with other people in different countries and different time zones, different behaviors. How do you come across if English is the company language, to make sure just because you understand it, will they understand the same words and the same subtleties in the words that you choose to use? So therefore, always check for understanding. So that leads me to number 4, optimizing your growth strategy. So we've grown the chilies, we understood what the customer wanted, but now I want to do some modeling. I want to optimize the yield that comes out of my hydroponics, which I've got installed, by the way, in my garden It's a wonderful system. Used it for the first time last year, and it's a wonderful system to do design of experiments with. Yes, I do get that bored in my private life. So yeah, apart from the weekends at the moment, supporting through a lovely charity, the mass vaccination, which again, there's a lot of modeling going on there. There's a lot of regression analysis going on in terms of making predictions, making planning. So first of all, keep it simple when you start with modeling. And it starts with regression analysis. It's one of the most fundamental ways of understanding the causal relationships, which is the aim. That's one of the fundamental elements that enable you to see if there's any relationship. So in this case, if you look at that picture, of course, you'll see on the x-axis the amount of fertilizer I'm going to add to my hydroponic system. On the y-axis, the growth rate. And not enough fertilizer. It won't grow. Too much fertilizer, too much nitrogen, you actually kill the plant. So there's a Goldilocks zone again, on target with minimum variation. Where is that optimum for the plants that you grow? Now, of course, watch out for lurking variables. Yeah, so sunlight, humidity, the night temperature, or in my case, if it's a plant which is not on a hydroponic system, that's why I went for it, by the way. I have no arguments about who has to water the plants. I mean, I like the plants here behind me, yeah, which do have to be watered. However, I went for a solution where you fill the bottom of them, and it's got a little indicator here, which you may not be able to see from a distance, but tells me when it needs refilling. And there's a wick at the bottom of these plants, so they always get the right amount of water. So look out for those lurking variables within your processes, and therefore always keep your eyes open. Now, other top tips. So why don't we go for Excel in this? It requires one more advanced level. We want to lift it out of the basics of high school scatter plots. We want to now lift it to the art, the beauty of regression modeling by also assessing the residuals. So are they normally distributed? Are there no outliers in the residuals? Are there no strange patterns? And they can give you, again, a unique insight that no other tool can give you. So the residuals, don't ignore them. And then a final question, it brings me back to one project where they did the testing and the regression model, they thought was going to be strong positive, it became strong negative. So the model was not in line with predictions, and they scratched their heads for a number of months until they started doing the deep dive. And they realized that the model was right based on the parameters they were working with. But there was a massive lurking variable that they had misjudged about its significance. So always don't get lost in the tools. Here's the model here. Check that the outcome from the model is in line with predictions, and therefore, adjust either your predictions, adjust your theory, or say, actually, no, there's something wrong here. Go and dig deeper. Now, a black belt tool, which sits here, of course. And before I do that, Rich, is there any question at this point?
Yeah, Dennis, it was just an observation that came in from your last point around don't get lost in the tools. Came in very quickly, so I thought I'd just jump whilst you're in flow. So the observation isn't the skill as a whole, not getting lost in the tool, much more important than using the tools themselves?
I think as a black belt, you need to be able to do both. Yeah, so you need to have that ability to do that deep dive, almost I'd say become absorbed by the tool and exploit the tool to its maximum use. But then of course, do that step back, do that reflection, do that introspection, say, hey, what I've just spent time and effort on, was it actually helping me to gain better insight? And instead coming from the detail to stepping out of the project. Yeah, because else indeed, and I fully agree with that observation, you become a tool head, a tool junkie.
I had an interesting experience this morning. It was actually on Greenbelt tools, but we're delivering Greenbelt alongside a level 4 apprenticeship scheme. And seeing, it was the induction day this morning, and seeing the list of accreditation requirements for the apprenticeship program took me back, and that question just resonated, that comment just resonated. because actually it's a fairly, although I appreciate the need for standardized assessment, it felt like a step backwards in many ways with the approach, until we had the discussion around it. And actually this scheme is sufficiently enlightened that the assessor can make a judgment, and they don't require what I thought I was hearing was a requirement, the old-fashioned requirement like you used to get to pass your black belt. Thou must demonstrate every single tool in every single way all the time. I'm very pleased to see that wasn't the case. It wasn't at black belt level, it was green belt level, but it struck me this morning that's the same situation, isn't it? It's not just knowing how to use the tool, it's knowing what tool to use when.
Absolutely.
And a real challenge though, isn't it, here? And I know you see this when you're reviewing projects, keeping those skills up to date is a real challenge with lack of practice.
Yes. No, absolutely, Rich. So I've just in the chat window, I've actually added, therefore, what I think is the right sequence, of course. Thinking first, then the method, and then the tools in that order. Black belt, no different. And it's I love being a tool junkie. I will not deny it. I love some of the tools, and I can spend hours, while the hours away, figuring out. In terms of keeping the skill set, I did my first black belt formal education back in 2001. And pretty much lost all of it until I joined the dark side of consultancy with PMI. And I had to unlearn and relearn so much. And of course, then you go to that next level, of course, you now have to teach others. You have to train others. So you have to up your skill game even more. So it's been a continuous journey. And even to this point, I literally got some other books the other day over there on the pile, the to-read pile. I won't show you. It's quite long. Some new thinking around attributes agreement study. I found a book that goes through, I thought it was only 2 methods. There's loads of methods for that. So now the question I've got from PMI's perspective, which one is right? Is the one we've got useful or is it the best one? Yeah. So absolutely.
Cheers, Dennis.
And so therefore I will paraphrase a quote by Myron Tribus. Now Myron Tribus said all models are wrong. Some are useful. So I will adjust this in this case, Richard, and lovely delegates, attendees here. All tools are wrong, but some are useful. So back to that the skill, which tool is useful to make sense of reality? Because the model, of course, is not reality. The tool is not reality, but they help us to make sense of reality. So that then leads, of course, back to this design of experiments. Now here I chose 3 classics when it comes to growth, temperature, sunlight hours, and relative humidity of the area where you're going to grow. You can do some optimizations around this. Now, one organization I worked with, whatever black belt project, and even green belt project they had, was always right. The answer is going to be DOE. It's going to be DOE. There are loads of DOEs, and don't get me wrong, they got a lot of insight from it, but often it was, we don't understand our process well enough. So they used the DOE effectively to come back to what's actually the question we're trying to answer here. What is actually the model that we're trying to assess and optimize? So top tip here is with the DOE, start with simple linear regression or simple multiple regression first. Select your most significant predictors and do not progress the DOE until you've done that, because else you're going to have rubbish in terms of the parameters you're going to do the experiment with. Now the next one then is back to that multiple regression model. Understand the simple interactions if you can, and only then make it more complicated. Other top tip, of course, test the boundaries of those parameters. Yeah, what is the highest value, the lowest value? And then understand if the relationship is linear, non-linear, so if you need to put a middle point in there. And of course, then do a judgment with your stakeholder about time, cost, and effort to run the DOE, especially if you're going to create a scrap. How are you going to deal with the scrap that comes out of this in terms of costing and budgeting? So again, top tips, understand, minimize, control. Yeah. So first, understand your outside influences. See if you can minimize them. If you can't minimize them, at the very least, can you control them? The lurking variables. And I've seen DOE applied not just in manufacturing. I've seen it used in IT, in financial services, in marketing as well. So there are lots of areas where we may not naturally think a DOE is useful, but as long as you have a process with multiple variables, which are strong predictors, and you know there's some kind of interaction going on, a DOE can be a brilliant tool. So number 5, will people want to eat my chili recipes? So I've got the chilies now, and I'm ready to give them to other people. And the one tool I want to share here, again, when I first came across this tool, it just opened my eye, and I still use it to this day extremely frequently, and it's called the primary intervention cycle. So primary intervention cycle is an amazing method, an amazing process for engaging with the other person and then moving the other person forward. So not you, not me. It's not about me. It's all about you. How do I move you forward? How do I make you successful? Within that, of course, the number one thing is that considering your own value. What's the value I'm going to add to this relationship with this other person? So I need to understand their readiness to change. But what value do I add? Then, of course, seek to gain entry. And you may not get that entry. They may say, I'm terribly sorry. Not today, thank you very much. Yeah. So that means, therefore, be patient. Be patient. Don't be afraid to go slow. You don't have to solve the world today or tomorrow in one go. So the last thing therefore here is, again, one thing I've had to learn, and this comes back to Dutch tact. I just use very short sentences, and you just state your opinion, and that's it. Like a little bomb, it goes off, and you just see the debris. Is to signpost, to effectively make an introduction to your statement. I would like to share with you, are you prepared to listen to what I have to say first? So seek the permission. Then say, is it okay if I talk about something developmental here? Again, seek permission. So go through a journey, go through a process using communication to understand, are they ready to work with you on making a change? So primary intervention cycle, absolute top tip. I had to use it this week again, outside work. So not just inside work, it works outside work as well. And that means, therefore, I'm sure you recognize the person in the back, Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory, Gustav Kloop. Yeah, in this case, of course, eating chili. So go at the pace that your client is prepared to go.
Of course he is. Why not?
So, last tool I want to share with you here. When you get stuck in the mud, just turn around. Now, for those of you that know TRIS is just one of those fascinating methods that tries to break through contradictions. It tries to resolve issues where we believe a compromise is the best solution. And TRIS says, no, it doesn't have to be a compromise. And there's one particular rule, TRIS rule number 13, just turn it around. I use it over and over again, not just with physical challenges, but also psychological challenges. So, reverse psychology, as they call it. That rule, as a matter of fact, this week again, I had to use it. I had a challenge in a calculation, a logical calculation, and I couldn't get my head around it until I just said, no, I'm going to turn the whole calculation around. And suddenly the answer, within 30 minutes, I fixed something that took me 2 weeks before, and I just couldn't get through how to make this model work. So I'm going to present 2 scenarios with you. Again, these 2 scenarios are completely real scenarios I'm dealing with at the moment with one of my other clients. And this client is actually cooking. They are very good chef, Indian curries, and they've decided to set up their own restaurant. Not their own restaurant, they had a restaurant. They've now stopped the restaurant. They're now going to go into what they call ghost kitchen, a very good kitchen, but just it's somewhere on industrial estate, and it's going to churn out amazing quality food based on his mother's recipes. And 3 different levels of spiciness, medium, mild, and hot. Now, one solution, this is not his solution, this is just, I'm just using it as an illustration here. One solution could be to say, right, I'm going to cook 3 different dishes. I'm going to add the spices into the oil or the ghee first to get all the aromas free. Then I'm going to add all the other ingredients, whatever ingredients you want to have into your curry, and that's what I'm going to sell. So on the shelf, in the fridge, these oven-ready meals are mild, medium, and hot. The customers complain. The mild isn't mild enough. The hot isn't hot enough. So the discussion I'm having with him is, right, hang on a minute, shall we now go for extra mild and Vindaloo strength? So now we have 5 different things to cook. And I guarantee you that none of them will sell well. Some of them will get close to sell-by date, and either then you have to sell them quickly at a discount, or of course you have to scrap them. And that's of course complete and utter waste. So scenario B, turn it around. I'm going to offer 3 dishes, mild, medium, and hot. But instead of adding the chilies first and then add the rest, I'm going to cook a mild dish. And in this case, the chiliness, the heat in the spices, I'm going to have them separate. I'm going to add them afterwards. But actually, I'm not going to add them. The customer's going to add them afterwards. And this has had amazing results. There's one in my fridge right now based on this scenario on the right. It's an amazing curry and it gets no customer complaints. Why? Because even though it's an oven-ready dish, yeah, and even though I'm going to have minimal effort to cook it and it's going to taste amazing, I can then adjust that spiciness with these special spices that they have curated, that's their unique blend from his mother. And therefore, I still have a little bit of personal influence over the cooking and the final result. And if I have some spices left over, guess what? I'm going to use them on other food. So now I get raving results. The sales increase, and actually I've got minimal waste. So this is just a really simple example of just turn it around. So think about your processes again in your organization. If you have push, pull, instead of asking something, offer something. Instead of somebody saying yes, what happens if they say no? One of the best way I find to figure out how to fix something is by breaking something, because then you need to know how to fix it. Insertion, extraction, instead of talking, listen to other people, instead of demanding, request. Yeah. So again, the other way around, my go-to rule if I ever get stuck and I can't figure a way to resolve the issue. So that leads me to a summary, and the summary is 5 points. So number 1, always start with a question and select the best tool to answer the question. Number 2, back to that, I think that point that one of our attendees made. You have a variety of tools and methods, both hard and soft, to diagnose and improve any process, and communicate exhaustively. And by that, actually, I mean use these. Listen to what they have got to say, their passions, their fears, their uncertainties. Also, when it comes to politics, of course, in the organization, how are you going to deal with the politics? And if in doubt, just reverse it. And then the last point, back to that earlier statement at the beginning of this webinar, you can only improve what you can measure. You can only measure what you can define, and you can only define what you can understand. So, Richard, those are some of my favorite tools at Black Belt.
Thank you, Dennis. Interesting that final point there with you can only improve what you can measure, because that's it's widely quoted. It's a Drucker quote, isn't it? I think that you can only manage what you can measure. See, I've never agreed with that. Because it's too limited. I understand his point. He was trying to make a specific point about the importance of measurement, but so I do think it's probably true though with improvement as opposed to just management in general, because there's so many more dimensions. Because it's that ubiquitous and age-old question number 1 on the 3-question model. How do you know a change is an improvement? Question 2, sorry. How do you know a change is an improvement?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I changed the quote. I first had the word manage in there, and I thought, no, I can manage anything. You don't need to have measurements, but to improve something truly, you need to have some kind of measurement. And it can be, hard data, or can be subjective data. It can be gut feel. Something, you say, yeah, something is better or worse. Something is different.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you,
Pleasure.
everyone, for your contributions. So that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Just a quick reminder, a couple of quick reminders that if any members of your team are looking for an introduction to improvement, our all new Lean Six Sigma online Yellow Belt is now available. And it's on, and I can actually see we've got some questions coming in, so I shall interrupt my script momentarily. Do take a look at the website to find out more about the Yellow Belt. It's selling like the proverbial hotcakes, so do let us know your do take a look at that. So just got a question popped in here from Chris. Often when you can measure something, there is a desire to improve it. Then you fall into the trap of diving straight in. Any tips for avoiding this, Dennis? Oh, we like a tough one like that, Chris. Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat that again? So anytime.
Sure. Often when you can measure something, there is a desire to improve it. Then you fall straight in.
Yeah.
Any tips?
So
it's resisting tampering almost, and
indeed,
and going straight in for the improvement as soon as you've done it. You've created a measurement process.
So indeed, so first of all, collect more data. Number one, understand that variation in your process, common cause, assignable cause. And actually, I'm just reflecting on my running. Whenever I do an ultra, I look at my heartbeat, and I need to make a decision there and then at the beginning of a 20-hour race, whether or not I need to slow down or not, because I've got 20 hours of running ahead of me. Yeah. So I keep checking that data for enough time so I know I need to change something or not. The other thing with that is, of course, what is the goal? What is the end goal? If, back to Chris, if the end goal is not an ultra of 20 hours, but a 100-meter sprint, you need to react quickly on the first data, that first step you make off the starting line, because you've only got 100 more paces or less before you're going to hit the end goal. So choose, so in terms of, so back to business, strategic importance. Whatever you're measuring today, how is it linked to the strategy, and is this an acceptable level, yes or no? So perhaps some of the tips, Chris. I hope it's answering the question, but if not, let me know.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. And hot on the tail of that, and building on your analogy of sprinting, tips on how to handle management who want results fast. Smiley emoji.
Yes. The impatient manager. I think I'm going to write a blog on that actually on LinkedIn because it's a recurring theme. I'm sure you recognize it within your organization.
Don't reference me.
The impatient manager, right. There once was a man called Richard. So yes. The key thing is, and this falls in multiple dimensions here. One is the education of the manager in terms of what is the problem and what is the method by which you are going to seek a solution. Because of course, back to old school management, problem today, solution tomorrow. It doesn't matter what the solution is, as long as there's a solution. And as you know, the change may be worse. So one recognition is on this journey, especially a black belt project, is to have these early quick wins. And the early quick win then has to be marketed by you. So the project charter or the PCD, the fact that jointly with the stakeholder, the manager, you've got a better picture of the current state. And then just articulate to the manager, this is a solution already. We've already fixed something, a better comprehension. So the education, that is a journey that you go on, I think is a key element for me of any good black belt and black belt project. Something else.
Yeah, no, I'd advocate that, Dennis. And I think your essential point there is, it's a practical way of dealing with two key points that have served me well throughout my career. Understanding that hope alone is not enough, i.e. hope that something will be different. And then secondly, the human instinct to confuse activity with improvement. That's where Dennis's suggestions about getting practical, it's addressing those two key fundamental principles.
And so communicate exhaustively and get them to understand the value of what you're doing. So back to no surprises. Don't do what I did on one of my projects, and this is many, many, many years ago. Yeah, you go into that dark room, you close the door, you do some magic, you come out and you go, ta-da, I fixed it. And they say, that's not what I wanted. So back to no surprises. Keep that communication channel open with your manager and keep checking in. So the last step in the improvement cycle in the first phase, select priorities, is agree review process. Have that review process with your sponsor.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, everyone, for your comments and feedback. So we have a special request on the Voice of the Customer survey. As usual, there's the question around suggestions for future topics, but specifically for participants in this, we'd also like you to think about there. Would you like Dennis to run a mini masterclass on any of the topics and tools that he's covered today? Do let us know. Oh, there we go. It's popped it in the chat there as well. So in the Voice of the Customer survey that will come out to you this afternoon, please do think about that question where it says, do you have any suggestions for future topics? If there's a mini masterclass you'd like us to run, let us know the topic you'd like that to be on. Be really interested to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Dennis, if you could just flick through to the schedule slide, please.
Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Go.
So as I mentioned earlier on, we have published May's schedule, and that is now available at pmi.co.uk/webinars. While Dennis trawls around trying to find it, it doesn't appear to be there, so that's all right. Oh, there it is. Ta-da.
Oh, that slide.
Cool. That slide, the one with the webinars on. Thank you. Anyone would think we'd practice this, wouldn't you? So the schedule is available. Next week is data collection tips, techniques with Mary Claire, and then leading into my webinar, which is big data to power improvement, and so on and so forth. And then there's a getting to grips with FMEA in a couple of weeks' time. They're all available to book now. Please do go ahead. So on that note, all that remains us to do is thank you very much for attending. It's great to have you with us. And on behalf of myself, Dennis, and PMI, we wish you a safe and relaxing weekend. Take care, folks.
Thank you all.